What happens when the teacher stops talking? Most language teaching methods assume that learning happens through explanation, modeling, and repetition. For decades, teachers were the primary source of language input in the classroom. The silent way turns that assumption upside down. In this method, the teacher speaks as little as possible, while learners are expected to produce language, notice patterns, and correct themselves. In this video, I'm going to explain what the silent way is, where it comes from, how it works in the classroom, and why it remains one of the most distinctive methods in the history of TESOL. Welcome back to TESOL with Miki and Ida. I'm Ida, an applied linguist, and today I'm going to talk about the silent way. The silent way is a language teaching method developed by Caleb Gattegno, a psychologist and educator who also developed words in color for teaching reading. Its defining feature is simple but radical. The teacher remains largely silent, while learners are encouraged to speak, experiment, and self-correct. Rather than explaining grammar or repeatedly modeling sentences, the teacher uses gestures, physical objects, and visual prompts to guide learners toward producing language themselves. Errors are rarely corrected directly by the teacher. Instead, learners are encouraged to notice problems, test alternatives, and adjust their own output. The central idea is that learning happens through discovery, not imitation. Now, let's look at the theory of learning behind the silent way. Well, the silent way is grounded in a cognitive code theory of learning rather than a behaviourist one. Gattegno believed that learning is most effective when learners are actively solving problems rather than memorizing and repeating forms. 3 key principles underpin the method. First, discovery learning. Drawing on psychologist Jeremy Bernner's work, Gattegno argued that learners understand language more deeply when they work things out for themselves rather than being told. Second, physical mediation. Learning is supported by physical objects and visual representations, which help reduce reliance on verbal explanation. Third, problem solving. Language learning is treated as a series of problems to be solved, not rules to be transmitted. A key concept in the silent way is the development of inner criteria. Learners learn to monitor their own speech, judge accuracy for themselves, and self-correct without constant teacher intervention. Learning is seen as moving through a cycle of attention, production, self-correction, and absorption. Now, what materials do we use in silent way? The silent way is closely associated with its distinctive materials. The most well-known are Cuisenaire rods, small colored wooden sticks of different lengths. These were originally developed by Georges Cuisenaire for teaching mathematics and were later adapted by Gattegno for language teaching. The rods are used to represent meaning, structure, and relationships between words. For example, rods can represent people, objects, locations, or grammatical relationships. Because meaning is carried by the rods, the teacher does not need to explain verbally. The method also uses color-coded pronunciation charts, often called fiddle charts. Each sound in the language is represented by a symbol, and the same sound always appears in the same color, even if it is written differently. The teacher points to the symbols, and learners produce the sounds or words, adjusting stress and intonation based on visual cues rather than spoken models. The core idea is that language is learned through perception and action, not explanation. So, let's see how a silent way lesson looks like. A silent way lesson is highly structured but minimally verbal. Lessons often begin with pronunciation work using the color-coded charts. The teacher may point to symbols silently while learners attempt to produce the correct sounds. For grammar and sentence structure, the teacher uses rods to create visual representation of meaning. A learner attempts to describe what they see. If the utterance is inaccurate, the teacher does not correct it directly, but instead gestures or rearranges the rods to prompt self-correction. The teacher may also elicit corrections from other students. Compared to audiolingualism, there is far less repetition and modeling. Compared to PPP, presentation, practice, production, there is no explicit explanation stage. Yet, despite these differences, the silent way often follows a fairly traditional structural syllabus, moving from guided elicitation to freer production, though in a much less teacher-centered way. The teacher's role is to set up the problem and then step back. Well, like any other method, the silent way has got its own strengths and criticisms. It's got several strengths to start with. It strongly promotes learner autonomy and responsibility. It develops careful attention to pronunciation and accuracy. It encourages learners to become active problem solvers rather than passive recipients. However, the method also faces significant criticisms. It places extremely high demand on teachers who must manage timing, materials, and learner responses with great precision. Teachers are often described as needing skills similar to a dramatist or a puppeteer, using gestures, timing, and manipulation rather than explanation. Many learners may find the lack of explanation uncomfortable or frustrating, particularly those accustomed to more traditional teacher-centered instruction. The method also requires specialized training, and it has never been widely adopted. As a result, the silent way is often described as a fringe method in TESOL with a limited research base. But the silent way still matters. Even though few teachers use the silent way in its pure form, its influence is still visible. Ideas such as reducing teacher talk, encouraging learner self-correction, and treating learning as a discovery rather than transmission are now widely accepted. The silent way also anticipated later interest in learner autonomy, which became central to language teaching in the 1990s and beyond. The method continues to have dedicated practitioners worldwide. In 2011, on the 100th anniversary of Gattegno's birth, a commemorative volume documented successful silent way use in many languages and countries. The silent way represents one of the most radical experiments in language teaching. You may never use it in your own classroom, but understanding it helps clarify fundamental questions about the teacher's role, learner autonomy, and how language is learned. If you found this useful, explore the rest of our TESOL Methods Explained playlist. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you very soon. Thanks for watching.